The alarm on Haywon's wrist device buzzed softly as she approached the Galactic Heritage Museum. She was running a few minutes late, but nobody would notice. Nobody ever noticed things like that about her. She had perfected the art of being invisible in plain sight over the course of 200 years. The museum itself was a magnificent structure, built on Zephyr Station, that orbited a distant neutron star. Its walls were made of crystalline material that shimmered with colors that did not exist in nature. Visitors from 1,000 different species walked through its corridors every day, each one marveling at the exhibits that told the story of civilizations long dead and forgotten. Haywon had worked here for the past 30 years as a xenoarchaeologist. And in all that time, she had never felt like she truly belonged. She pressed her hand against the entrance scanner, and the massive doors slid open with a gentle hiss. The cool air of the museum washed over her face as she stepped inside, her silver skin, genetically modified to match the appearance of a Centauri Coalition member, reflected the soft blue light of the corridor. Her eyes, engineered to see across 11 different spectrums of light, scanned the hallway for any unusual activity. Everything appeared normal. Everything always appeared normal. Haywon walked through the museum with practiced efficiency, nodding to colleagues as she passed them. They greeted her with polite indifference, which was exactly what she wanted. She was Dr. Haywon Park, a respectable researcher who kept to herself and did her work without causing trouble. Nobody questioned her credentials. Nobody asked too many questions about her past. The false identification that the underground had provided decades ago was flawless. But today was different. Today, a new exhibition had opened, and Haywon could not stop thinking about it since she had received the announcement that morning. She had read the title again and again, hoping she was misunderstanding something, hoping the words would change meaning if she looked at them long enough. They did not. Ancient human relics from the defunct Terran epoch. Her heart had jumped in her chest when she read those words. Humans. Her people. The species that everyone in the Coalition believed had destroyed themselves 12,000 years ago in what historians called the Extinction Wars. The homeworld of Earth had been consumed by the dying sun's expansion, and all evidence of human civilization had been lost to the vacuum of space. At least, that was what every official record claimed. Haywon knew the truth was more complicated than that. She made her way to the new exhibition wing, her mind racing with questions she could not ask out loud. How had they found these artifacts? Where had they come from? What exactly were they displaying? The possibilities terrified and excited her in equal measure. The last time she had seen genuine human objects was nearly 100 years ago, hidden away in a secret archive, maintained by the underground. Those objects had brought tears to her eyes. They had reminded her of who she really was, beneath all the masks and false identities. As she approached the exhibition entrance, Haywon felt her hands beginning to tremble slightly. She forced herself to take slow, deep breaths. She could not afford to draw attention to herself. Not now. Not ever. Her survival depended on blending in, on being forgettable, on being nothing more than another worker among millions. The entrance to the exhibition was decorated with holograms showing images of Earth as it had been before the final catastrophe. She saw mountains and oceans, cities with tall buildings reaching toward the sky, and faces of humans smiling and laughing. The images were blurry and pixelated, as if deliberately obscured by the museum curators. But Haywon recognized the places. She had read about them in ancient records. Some of them she had visited herself. She stepped through the doorway, and her breath caught in her throat. The exhibition hall was vast and beautiful, with display cases arranged in careful rows beneath soft holographic lighting. Each case contained an object from human history, each one carefully preserved and labeled. Haywon walked slowly between the cases, her eyes moving from one artifact to another, unable to process what she was seeing. There was a tattered American flag, the colors still visible despite the passage of centuries. Next to it was a sculpture of a man reaching toward the sky, his face carved with such emotion that it seemed almost alive. Haywon recognized the style immediately. It was classical human art, the kind that had been created thousands of years before the final wars. The kind that expressed the human desire to reach beyond themselves, to touch something greater than they were. She moved deeper into the exhibition, discovering more objects that made her heart ache. There were old coins stamped with human faces. There were pages from books written in English, Korean, and Mandarin. There were photographs in frames showing families gathered together, their faces frozen in moments of joy that had occurred millennia ago. There were toys made of faded plastic, so ancient that they barely held their original shapes. There were wedding dresses and military uniforms, and cooking utensils and musical instruments. And then she found the display that broke something inside her. It was a small case, positioned in a place of honor near the center of the exhibition. Inside was a simple gold ring, so small it could fit on a child's finger. Next to the ring was a photograph and a handwritten letter, her vision blurring slightly as she tried to read the faded text. "To my beloved Minnie," the letter began. "If I do not return from the expedition, I want you to know that every moment I spent with you was worth living for. Every day with you was a gift that I did not deserve but will treasure forever. The stars are calling me to go, but my heart will always remain with you. I love you more than the universe itself. Forever yours, Tae-ho." The date was written in what humans called the Earth calendar. 2087. Over 9,000 years ago, Haewon's knees became weak. She gripped the edge of the display case to steady herself. Minnie was her great-great-great-grandmother's name. Tae-ho was the name of the man who had discovered the jump gates that allowed humans to escape Earth before the sun's expansion destroyed the planet. He was the hero of her family's history, the man who had saved thousands of lives. He was a legend whispered about in secret gatherings of the underground, and his final letter to his wife was sitting in this museum, on display for anyone to see. Haewon looked around the exhibition hall. There were only a few other visitors, scattered among the cases, studying the artifacts with the casual interest of tourists learning about an extinct species. None of them seemed to understand what they were looking at. To them, these were just old things from a dead civilization. They had no idea that they were standing in the presence of human history, of the actual possessions of real people who had lived and loved and dreamed just like anyone else. She turned back to the letter, reading it again, her hands shaking. She could feel something building inside her. Something that had been kept locked away and buried for so long that she had almost forgotten it was there. It was a feeling of recognition, of connection, of belonging to something that transcended time and distance. Without thinking about what she was doing, without considering the consequences, Haewon whispered the words that had been forbidden to speak for so many years. "That is my family." The moment the words left her lips, Haewon knew she had made a terrible mistake. The automated security system in the museum's exhibition hall immediately responded to the unusual activity detected in her voice. Sirens began to wail softly, barely audible to most species but crystal clear to her enhanced hearing. Red lights flickered to life across the ceiling, casting the entire hall in a crimson glow. Security drones descended from their hidden compartments above, their mechanical bodies moving with precision as they locked onto her position. The other visitors in the exhibition panicked. A tall Zarkonian merchant with 4 arms grabbed his companion and rushed toward the exit. A group of young students from the Coalition Academy huddled together, confused and frightened. The museum's automated guide system announced in a calm, mechanical voice that all visitors should proceed to the evacuation areas for their safety. Within seconds, the entire wing had emptied, except for Haewon, who stood motionless before the display case containing her ancestor's letter. She could have run. Her enhanced reflexes and strength would have allowed her to move faster than any of the security drones could respond. She could have used the secret exit routes that she had discovered years ago when she first began working at the museum. She could have disappeared into the vastness of Zephyr Station and made her way to one of the safe houses maintained by the underground. But she did not run. Instead, she stood there, her hands still trembling, staring at the letter and the ring as if they were the most important things in the entire universe. Perhaps they were. Perhaps in this moment, they were the only things that mattered. The security drones moved closer, forming a perfect circle around her. Their weapons powered up with a low humming sound that made her sensitive hearing vibrate painfully. Through the speakers embedded in their metallic bodies, a recording of her own voice from her initial employment interview played back. It was a standard security procedure, meant to confuse and disorient any person suspected of being a threat. But HFY barely heard it. She was lost in her own thoughts, in the overwhelming sensation of her carefully constructed life beginning to collapse around her like a building in an earthquake. Statement clarification required. The museum's central artificial intelligence announced, its voice echoing through the now empty exhibition hall. Identify yourself. Visitor, your language pattern does not match your registered personnel file. Genetic sequence analysis shows anomalies. Please explain your presence in this location and your connection to the artifacts. HFY closed her eyes. She could feel her body beginning to respond to the emotional stress of the moment. The genetic mask that she had worn for so many years, the careful modifications that made her appear to be a Centauri Coalition member, was becoming unstable. The technology had been cutting edge when it was first implemented, but after 2 centuries of use, it was beginning to degrade under the stress of her emotional reaction. She opened her eyes and looked down at her hands. The silver skin was beginning to shimmer and flicker, like a hologram losing power. Beneath the artificial surface, she could see the warm brown color of her original skin beginning to show through. The transformation was accelerating now, becoming visible to anyone watching. There was no turning back, no hiding, no more pretending. HFY lowered her hands and allowed the mask to fall away completely. The transformation was painful. HFY, the lowered, Olivar, more painful than she remembered from the last time she had allowed her true appearance to surface. Years and years of genetic modifications had made her body almost forget what it was supposed to look like originally. But beneath all the artificial enhancements and false identities, her human DNA was still there, still fighting to reassert itself. Her skin became warmer, richer, more alive. Her eyes shifted from the artificial enhancement that had allowed her to see 11 spectrums of light, down to the normal 3 that humans possessed. The world immediately became less vivid, less detailed, but somehow more real. Her facial features changed, becoming rounder, less angular. Lines appeared on her face that had been hidden beneath the mask for decades. Her hair, which had been smooth and silver, became dark and slightly wavy. She looked like herself for the first time in over 100 years. The true HFY Park, not the false xenoarchaeologist version, but the real person underneath, the woman who had been born on a generation ship traveling between the stars. The woman who had descendants scattered across Coalition space, most of them not even aware of what they truly were. The security drones held their position, uncertain how to respond to the dramatic transformation happening before their sensors. The AI paused its repeated demands for clarification, processing the genetic data that was now flowing openly from her body into its systems. For a moment, there was complete silence in the exhibition hall. "My name is HFY Park," she said, her voice carrying an accent that had not been heard in recorded galaxy history for over 9,000 years. The accent of Old Earth Korean, preserved in the genetic memory of her people. "I am a direct descendant of the Korean dynasty that ruled the Korean peninsula before the Extinction Wars. Before the sun consumed our homeworld. Before we were scattered across the stars and told to forget who we were." She pointed to the display case containing her ancestor's letter and ring. This letter was written by Park Tae-ho, my great-great-great-grandfather. He was an astrophysicist who discovered the jump gates that allowed our people to escape Earth's final days. This ring belonged to Min-ae, his wife, my great-great-great-grandmother. They were real people. They lived. They loved each other. And they had children who survived and built families that continue to this day. HFY moved her gaze to the photograph displayed beside the letter. It showed a man and a woman standing together on the observation deck of a spacecraft, with Earth visible behind them, blue and green, and beautiful in the darkness of space. The man had his arm around the woman, and they were both smiling at the camera, completely unaware that their image would survive for more than 9,000 years, waiting to be found by their descendant in a museum dedicated to the species that everyone believed was dead. I am the proof that you were wrong, Haywan continued, speaking directly to the museum's central intelligence and to whoever might be monitoring her words through the security feeds. Humanity did not go extinct. We survived. We adapted. We changed ourselves to blend in with the rest of the galaxy. But we never stopped being human. We never stopped loving. We never stopped dreaming. And now, I stand before you, showing the truth that has been hidden for so long. The security drones began to move closer, their weapons charging with an increasing hum. But Haywan did not flinch. She had spent 2 centuries hiding, running, pretending to be something she was not. In this moment, as she stood before the most precious artifacts of her people, she refused to hide anymore. Whatever came next, whatever punishment or imprisonment awaited her, at least she would face it as herself. At least she would be honest about who she really was. The transformation from hidden to revealed was complete, and everything that happened after this moment would change the entire history of the galaxy forever. The security drones froze in mid-approach. Their weapons remained charged, but they did not fire. Through the exhibition hall's main entrance, a new group of people entered, moving with the kind of authority that made even the automated security systems pause their response. These were not ordinary museum staff or standard security personnel. These were members of the Coalition Council's private security detail, marked by their crimson uniforms and the insignia that displayed a symbol of absolute governmental power. Leading the group was Director Kyung-soo, one of the highest-ranking officials in the entire Centauri Coalition. Hae-won recognized him immediately from the news broadcasts and official announcements that played throughout the station. He was an older man, with the kind of bearing that came from decades of making life and death decisions that affected billions of people. His face was stern, his expression unreadable, but his eyes held something that Hae-won had not expected to see: recognition. And perhaps, if she was not mistaken, something that looked very much like respect. Kyung-soo raised his hand, and the security drones powered down their weapons and retreated back to their positions in the ceiling. The crimson uniformed guards spread out throughout the exhibition hall, securing the area and blocking the exits. This was no longer a simple security situation. This had become something far more important, far more dangerous. Dr. Hae-won Park, Kyung-soo said, his voice calm and measured, as if they were simply greeting each other at a social gathering, rather than at the scene of what was clearly a major breach in security protocols. He walked across the exhibition hall toward her, his footsteps echoing loudly in the now silent space. I must admit, I have been expecting this moment for quite some time, though I confess, I thought it would take longer for you to reveal yourself. Hae-won straightened her posture, trying to understand what was happening. This was not the reaction she had anticipated. She had expected anger, threats, attempts to recapture her and force her back into hiding. She had not expected this calm acknowledgement, this sense that her revelation had been somehow anticipated. You know what I am, Hae-won said. It was not a question. It was a statement of fact that she was beginning to understand. I know what you are, Kyung-soo agreed. He stopped a few meters away from her, maintaining enough distance that the guards could intervene if necessary, but close enough that they could speak in relative privacy. More importantly, I know what you represent, and I suspect you would like to understand how your family's artifacts ended up in this museum in the first place. Hae-won nodded slowly, not trusting herself to speak. Her mind was racing, trying to calculate the implications of this conversation. If the Coalition Council knew who she was, if they had known all along that she was human, then why had they allowed her to work here for 30 years? Why had they not arrested her immediately? Why had they created this exhibition in the first place? Kyung-soo walked over to the display case containing Taeho's letter and ring. He gazed at the items for a long moment, his expression becoming almost contemplative. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, more intimate. The Coalition Council discovered something 70 years ago, he said. During a routine archive exploration, we found encrypted records from the early days of our organization, records that spoke of a secret project called Operation Exodus. These records detailed the escape of the human population before Earth's destruction. They described how your ancestors scattered across the galaxy, integrating themselves into developing civilizations under assumed identities. Some of them became merchants. Others became scholars. A few became part of our government. He turned to face Heywan directly. We have known for decades that humanity did not truly go extinct. We simply hid. And we allowed that hiding to continue because revealing the truth seemed far too dangerous. Dangerous? Heywan's voice rose slightly. How could the truth be dangerous? How could my people wanting to be acknowledged and remembered be a threat? Because, Kyung-Soo replied, for over 12,000 years, we have taught every species in the coalition that humanity was a cautionary tale, that you were a civilization that destroyed itself through warfare and environmental collapse, that you were proof of what happens when a species becomes too advanced too quickly without developing the wisdom to use that advancement responsibly. We built an entire moral and philosophical framework around the idea that human ambition and human nature led inevitably to destruction. He gestured around the exhibition hall, at all the artifacts of human history and achievement. If we suddenly announced that humans had survived, that you had thrived, that you had built new societies and integrated into our civilization, while maintaining your unique culture and identity, it would shatter everything we have built. It would force every species in the coalition to reconsider everything they believe about civilization, advancement, and the nature of existence itself. Heywan walked over to a display case showing photographs of old Earth, of great cities, and magnificent landscapes. So you created this exhibition to hide the truth in plain sight, to display our artifacts as if they were nothing more than curiosities from a dead species. Precisely. Kyung-Soo confirmed. The exhibition was a way to preserve your history while simultaneously ensuring that no one would recognize that history as proof of your continued existence. A few scholars might notice something unusual. A few researchers might find inconsistencies in the dating. But the general population would simply see this as a museum exhibition dedicated to an extinct civilization. No threat. No need to reevaluate our entire understanding of history and society. But something changed, Heywan said, understanding beginning to dawn on her. Something forced you to bring this exhibition to the public. Something made you need to search for people like me. Kyung-Soo's expression became darker, more serious. Something did change. And that is where this situation becomes far more complicated and far more dangerous than you might currently understand. He nodded to one of his guards, who approached carrying a data tablet. Kyung-Soo took the device and showed it to Heywan. It contained video surveillance footage from various locations throughout Coalition space. What Heywan saw made her blood run cold. The footage showed people being kidnapped, beings of various species being taken to secret facilities. And in some of the footage, she could see humans being subjected to genetic procedures and modifications, being enhanced and transformed into something new, something that looked almost human but was somehow fundamentally different. This is Curator Jae-in's work, Kyung-Soo explained quietly. She is human, like you. But she made a different choice about what humanity could become. She has been working with a faction within the council to develop a new kind of being. They call it the perfect form, a creature that combines human potential with genetic enhancements from every advanced species in the galaxy. The goal is to create an ultimate soldier, an ultimate ruler, a being that could dominate any other species through both intellect and physical capability. Heywan stared at the footage in horror, watching as the people on the screens were transformed into something alien to human nature. Why would she do this? Why would she betray her own people? Because, Kyung-Soo said sadly, she believes that this is the only way for humanity to truly claim its place in the galaxy. And because she convinced certain members of the Coalition Council that this dream was worth pursuing. He looked directly at Heywan, and in his eyes, she could see the weight of secrets and difficult decisions. This exhibition was created to identify all the hidden humans in our society. It is a trap, designed to trigger emotional responses only human DNA could produce. You are not the first to reveal yourself here, but you are perhaps the most important, because you work here, because you have access, and because we were hoping that when you appeared, you would choose to help us stop what Jae-in is doing before it is too late. Before Heywan could respond to Kyung-soo's revelation, a new figure emerged from the shadows at the far end of the exhibition hall. Her appearance was shocking in its perfection. She looked almost human, but not quite. Her skin seemed to shimmer with an iridescent quality that was not natural. Her eyes held depths that suggested enhancements beyond anything Heywan had ever seen. Her body moved with a fluidity and grace that seemed almost too perfect to be biological. This was Curator Jae-in. "How theatrical you are, Director," Jae-in said, her voice like silk sliding over steel. "Always so concerned with diplomacy and cooperation. Always convinced that you can solve every problem through discussion and negotiation. It is what makes your entire generation so hopelessly outdated." Kyung-soo's hand moved to the communication device on his waist, but before he could activate it, energy barriers sprang up around the exhibition hall, blocking the entrances and creating a sealed environment. Jae-in had clearly anticipated this moment and prepared for it. Her guards, positioned throughout the station in locations Heywan had never suspected, had activated their suppression equipment, cutting off all external communications. "Jae-in," Kyung-soo said, his voice remaining calm despite the obvious threat. "This is not the way. You are human. Surely you understand what you are destroying by pursuing this path." "I understand perfectly," Jae-in replied, walking slowly across the exhibition hall toward Heywan. Her movements were hypnotic, almost predatory. "I understand that humanity has always been limited by our biology. We are weak. We are fragile. We break and deteriorate and eventually die. We fight amongst ourselves instead of reaching for greater purposes. But imagine if we could change that. Imagine if we could transcend our limitations and become something truly magnificent." She stopped a few meters away from Heywan, studying her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. "This one is perfect. Look at her. Director. She has survived 200 years hiding in plain sight, maintaining her cover while working within one of the most important institutions in coalition space. The intelligence, the discipline, the adaptability, these are the genetic markers we need. Imagine what she could become if we enhanced her properly. Imagine what she could achieve if freed from the constraints of ordinary humanity." Heywan stepped backward, putting the display case with her ancestor's letter between herself and Jae-in. "I am not interested in your promises of transcendence. I am interested in preserving what we are, not destroying it to become something else." "Preserving what we are?" Jae-in laughed, a sound like wind chimes made of ice. "What we are is obsolete. We are a footnote in galactic history. A species that destroyed its own homeworld and scattered like refugees across the stars. We hide ourselves. We pretend to be something we are not. We deny our own nature. Is that really what you want to preserve? That weakness? That shame?" Kyung-soo moved closer to Heywan, placing himself between her and Jae-in. "She is one of us. Jae-in, a member of our species. You cannot simply take her for your experiments, cannot?" Jae-in's smile widened, becoming something that looked less like an expression of joy and more like the baring of predatory teeth. "I have already taken 17 humans from coalition space over the past 5 years. I have already created 5 prototypes of the perfect form, and the Coalition Council is supporting my work because they understand what you refuse to accept, Director. The future belongs to the evolved. The future belongs to those willing to become something more than they were born as." She gestured, and her guards entered the exhibition hall through an entrance that Hei-1 had not even known existed. There were perhaps a dozen of them, each one enhanced in ways that made it clear they were not natural beings. Some had extra limbs. Some had skin that shimmered with an opalescent quality. All of them moved with the kind of coordination and purpose that suggested they had been designed rather than born. "You are a fool if you believe that the council would tolerate this without consent," Kyung-soo said, his voice dropping to the tone of someone making a final accusation. "The council did not send me here alone without backup. The moment my signal stops transmitting, security forces will descend on this station. Your signal stopped transmitting the moment we raised the energy barriers," Jae-in replied calmly. "And the council members who are backing my work have already initiated their own protocol. They have taken control of the station's security systems. Any attempt to interfere with my plans will result in a catastrophic decompression that will destroy everyone on this station. The council has decided that my work is too important to be disrupted by people like you, who cannot see the obvious path forward." Hei-1's mind was racing, trying to process the enormity of what was happening. Jae-in had somehow managed to infiltrate the highest levels of the coalition government. She had convinced enough people in positions of power to support her agenda. This was not a rogue operation. This was an institutional conspiracy with the backing of major governmental figures. "What do you want from me?" Hei-1 asked, though she could already guess the answer. "I want you to volunteer for the enhancement procedure," Jae-in said simply. "I want you to understand that what I am offering is not a violation or a violation of your nature, but rather a fulfillment of your potential. You have survived for 200 years by pretending to be something you are not. Imagine what you could become if you stopped pretending. Imagine the power, the clarity, the purpose that comes from being enhanced to your absolute potential." Hei-1 looked at the guards surrounding them, then at Kyung-soo, whose expression suggested he was calculating possibilities and outcomes at lightning speed. She looked back at the display case containing her ancestor's letter and ring. The letter that spoke of love. The ring that symbolized commitment and connection to another person. The most human things that existed. "No," Hei-1 said quietly. "Pardon?" Jae-in's perfect expression flickered, showing confusion for just a moment. "I said no," Hei-1 repeated, her voice becoming stronger. "I will not volunteer. I will not allow myself to be transformed into your perfect form, because I understand something that you have apparently forgotten. Something that makes us human is not our ability to be enhanced or evolved. It is our capacity for love, for compassion, for connection. It is our ability to choose our own path, even when that path is difficult or uncertain." Jae-in's expression hardened. "Then you leave me no choice but to force the procedure upon you." She gestured to her guards, who moved forward. But before they could reach Hei-1, Kyung-soo made his move. He pulled out a device from his uniform that transmitted a coded signal, overriding the energy barriers that Jae-in had activated. The barriers flickered and failed, and in the distance, the sound of alarms began to wail throughout the station. "I told you," Kyung-soo said to Jae-in, "that I did not come alone without backup. The signal I sent was not to security forces. It was to every broadcast system on this station. Everything that has been said in this exhibition hall for the past 5 minutes is now being transmitted across coalition space. The truth about you, Jae-in. The truth about your experiments. The truth about the conspiracy within the council." Jae-in's face contorted with rage. "You have doomed us all." But she was already moving toward the door, her guards scrambling to follow her. Hei-1 realized in that moment that Kyung-soo's revelation was not entirely accurate. He had not sent a signal to broadcast systems. He had done something far more dangerous. He had given Hei-1 an opportunity to escape, and now it was time for her to take it. Hei-1 did not hesitate. She understood immediately what Kyung-soo had done and what it meant. She ran toward the nearest terminal in the exhibition hall, her enhanced reflexes allowing her to move faster than any of Jae-in's guards could respond. Her fingers flew across the holographic interface, with the practiced speed of someone who had spent 3 decades learning the inner workings of this place. She was not just a researcher in this museum, she was also its most intimate student. Someone who had learned every secret pathway, every security protocol, every backup system. The museum's central database contained all the broadcast frequencies used throughout the station. More importantly, it contained the master encryption keys that allowed access to coalition-wide communication systems. HFY had discovered these secrets months ago while researching the ancient archives, and she had stored them in a hidden partition that she had always hoped she would never need to access. Now, facing the revelation of Jae-in's conspiracy and understanding that the highest levels of coalition government were involved, she knew that desperate times required desperate measures. Her fingers worked at blinding speed, breaking through security protocols that would have taken a normal person hours to bypass. But HFY was not normal. She was 200 years old, with a lifetime of knowledge and experience compressed into a body that looked 30 years old. She had learned encryption from the masters of the underground, people who had been hiding secrets for millennia. "Stop her!" Jae-in shouted from across the exhibition hall, but it was already too late. HFY's fingers found the final encryption code. The database opened, revealing centuries of communication infrastructure laid bare to her access. She was not sending a signal to security forces as Kyung-soo had claimed. She was doing something far more powerful and far more dangerous. She was uploading the complete file containing all the evidence of Jae-in's experiments directly to every broadcast system in Coalition space. The data flowed through the communication networks like a tidal wave. Videos of the kidnappings, records of the enhancement procedures, documents showing which council members had authorized the experiments and which ones had benefited financially from Jae-in's work, personal files containing the names and locations of all the humans who had already been captured and transformed into prototypes of the perfect form. Everything. All of it. Exposed simultaneously to billions of people across hundreds of star systems. Jae-in's guards made a desperate rush toward the terminal where HFY worked, but Kyung-soo and his coalition security team moved to intercept them. The exhibition hall erupted into chaos, with weapons, fire, and energy blasts lighting up the crystalline displays. Some of the ancient human artifacts shattered under the violence, turning to dust for the first time in thousands of years. HFY watched as the data upload reached 80% completion. Come on, she thought desperately. Just a few more seconds. A blast of energy meant for her head barely missed, scorching the wall beside the terminal. She did not look up. She could not afford to be distracted. 90%. The upload was almost complete. Another blast, this one closer. She felt the heat of it against her skin, smelling the burning of her hair. Her hands remained steady on the interface. 95%. Kyung-soo was still fighting against Jae-in's guards, but he was elderly and not enhanced for combat. He was taking damage, and it was clear that he could not hold them off much longer. HFY wanted to help him, wanted to do something to assist the man who had given her this opportunity. But she could not leave the terminal now. Not when they were so close. 100%. The upload was complete. HFY pressed the final confirmation key, and the data lock engaged. The information was now permanently distributed across Coalition space, through dozens of different channels that could not be shut down without destroying the entire communication infrastructure. The truth about Jae-in was out. The truth about the conspiracy was out. The truth about humanity's survival was out. But Jae-in was still there, and she was still dangerous. She emerged from the chaos with blood on her perfect face and murder in her enhanced eyes. Behind her, only 3 of her guards remained standing. Ahead of her lay Kyung-soo, barely conscious, bleeding from several wounds. And beyond him was HFY, who had backed away from the terminal now that her work was done. "You have destroyed everything," Jae-in hissed, her voice filled with rage and something else. Something that sounded almost like grief. "Everything I was trying to build. Everything I was trying to achieve for our people. And for what? For some nostalgic attachment to an inferior past? For a desire to remain weak and limited? For the right to choose what we become," HFY replied. her own voice steady despite the terror running through her veins. You wanted to force us all into your perfect form, to make us all into the same thing, to erase our individuality and our freedom. That is not evolution, Jae-in. That is extinction wearing a mask of progress. Jae-in raised her hand, and energy began to coalesce above her palm, building into a weapon that would easily be powerful enough to kill everyone in the exhibition hall. But before she could release the attack, the security barriers sprang back to life. But this time, they were controlled by the Coalition's central authority, not by Jae-in's people. Through the newly opened doors, Coalition security forces poured in, hundreds of them. They came from every species represented in the Coalition, united by the broadcast that had reached billions of people throughout galactic space. What Haewon had revealed was not just a conspiracy, it was a fundamental betrayal of everything the Coalition claimed to stand for. It was genocide disguised as advancement. It was slavery disguised as evolution. Jae-in looked at the forces surrounding her, and something inside her broke. She lowered her hand. The energy weapon dissipated harmlessly into the air. She fell to her knees. No longer the perfect, predatory being who had walked into the exhibition hall only minutes before. She was just a human now. A broken human who had made a terrible choice and paid the price for it. Haewon knelt beside Kyung-soo, checking his injuries. They were serious but not immediately life-threatening. The guards were already calling for medical assistance. Around them, the Coalition forces secured the remaining opposition. Jae-in was taken into custody without resistance. The exhibition hall fell silent, except for the sound of sirens and the voice of the Coalition's central AI announcing emergency protocols across the entire station. Haewon looked around at the destroyed display cases, at the shattered fragments of human history, and she thought about what had just happened. She had revealed herself. She had exposed humanity to the galaxy. She had destroyed a conspiracy. But in doing so, she had also made it impossible to hide anymore. The secret that humans had maintained for 12,000 years was now known to everyone. The consequences of that revelation would ripple through galactic civilization for centuries to come. But as she looked at Kyung-soo's face, at the relief in his eyes, and as she thought about all the humans who had been rescued from Jae-in's experiments, Haewon realized that sometimes the price of truth was worth paying. Sometimes revealing who you really were mattered more than maintaining the safety of a comfortable lie. The path forward was uncertain and dangerous, but for the first time in 200 years, Haewon could face that uncertain future as herself. And that, she thought, was worth absolutely everything.